Welcome Reddit bingers. Hey Reddit, when did your something's not right here gut feeling ever save you? I went to hospital with shortness of breath and my heart racing. They did a chest x-ray, blood test for blood clots, ECG, and a few other tests but all came back normal. After observing me overnight everything still looked good. Oxygen saturation was perfect, my heart rate was still a bit elevated but nothing too crazy, and it seemed that it was likely leftover symptoms from a bad virus that I'd had a week or so earlier. The ER doctor asks me how I would feel if they sent me home and I just had a bad feeling about it all. I told him as such and that I had no real basis for it except that I just felt off about it. He said fair enough. Let's try one more test and if that comes back negative then we'll send you up to general medicine and see if they can track something down. That test was a VQ scan that found despite all other tests showing no results for blood clots, I actually had a whole bunch of them in both lungs. I ended up with a diagnosis of unprovoked bilateral pulmonary embolisms and am on blood thinners for life. Super grateful both for the bad feeling and the ER doctor who was willing to listen to it. I was 15 years old and my mum dropped me off at McDonald's to get breakfast while she went across the street to get Starbucks. It was a shopping mall in suburbia and we were on the way to pick up a new kitten a few hours away. Instead of walking the 100 yards to my mum I sat outside waiting for her to pick me up. Teenagers I guess. As I'm standing there a guy in an old station wagon with two kids in the back starts talking to me. He asks me where I'm going and I say whatever town it was. He says he's going there too with his kids and asks if I want to come. I tell him no, that my mum is across the street, and he comes closer. My gut is saying something is off, so I see a random woman walk out of Starbucks and I point to her and say that's my mum right there. He freaked out and left really quick. I still remember those two kids in the back seat. They looked so off. I wonder to this day if they are okay. This is one of the creepiest stories I've read yet. Also, at 15 why would you decide to hop in a stranger's car anyway? Presumably, if you say you're going to another town you already have transportation. My aunt told me a story about my dad, who greatly dislikes his sister and is an all-around asshole 98% of the time, calling her out of the blue one night while she was in college. She answered. He said he didn't know why but he had this urge to call her, to make sure she was okay. She told him she was fine and thanked him for calling to check on her. She never told anyone else except me, and hopefully a therapist or two, but she was holding the bottle of pills she was planning to commit suicide with right when he called her. 20-some years later and she's very happy with her decision to live. This some Jedi stuff. Forgot one. About 10 years ago. Working security at a site about 50 miles from home, got off shift at midnight, and didn't bother to change out of uniform because I was only going to stop for gas. 2 stations in the town I was working in were open after midnight, but it slipped my mind as I drove past the first one. Pulled into the other, same brand, same gas price, same sort of dump entirely, and just didn't like something about it. Nobody else around but he Clark that I could see, but I decided to go back to the other one. Topped off and headed back out of town, I get close to that station again. 3 city cop cars, 2 deputies and a state trooper are outside blocking the road with guns drawn. Turns out a city cop walked in on a robbery. Dude put a bullet in his vest, and the store owner knocked the robber out cold with a bat before the cop could recover enough to get his gun out. That would have been me, in a uniform with a nice shiny badge, but no body armor. Wow. In all earnestness, you actually dodged a bullet on that one. I was in the Amazon as the end to a 3-month solo trip around Latin America. Wanted to enjoy one last walk through the jungle before leaving, so left my jungle lodge around 8 AM to walk down to a small river nearby. I stop and close my eyes to listen to the sounds as the jungle is super loud with crickets, birds, insects etc. Almost immediately I got a weird feeling and felt really uncomfortable, which was weird because up until then I'd only felt peaceful and happy. When I opened my eyes, I realized everything had gone completely quiet, which was definitely not normal and not something I had experienced in other rainforests I'd been to. It was bizarre. I immediately felt that I had to leave and fast. After I dipped and got back to the jungle lodge, I told the tour guide what happened and he said it usually only gets quiet when there is a big predator close by. Thanks but no thanks. In 2004, on Boxing Day. Not me but my mother. Family trip including all cousins and extended family on my dad's side to visit the coastal south of Sri Lanka on vacation. About 20 people in all. Well-planned trip, last moment my mother didn't want to go. No reason at all. None of us could get her to explain why, but she refused to go. So we went inland on a different trip to see some other relatives. Around midday, the entire extended family now on both sides were sitting shocked in front of the television watching the very same hotel we booked being washed away live by the tsunami. To date, she still can't explain what she felt. Just like yours, my mother suddenly decided not go. A last-minute decision, bags packed and everything, and without any explanation our first vacation was just cancelled. And that's why I didn't die aboard the Scandinavian Star in 1990. Thanks Mom. My boyfriend and I were visiting friends for a week in Phoenix. We girls were lounging at the pool while the guys were flexing their grilling skills. My boyfriend paused a moment, stood very still, then told me to go get dressed. We had to go. Right now. I wanted to fuss but something told me not to. We drove straight through to San Antonio, right to his parents' very rural house. Before cell phones, and they didn't have a landline within a half-mile. Seconds before we arrived his little sister had jumped off of a rain barrel and landed on a metal spike that went straight up through her foot and into her leg. His dad was at work, so there was no car available there. She was bleeding like crazy and his mother had just walked out and found her. I don't know what spoke to him in Phoenix, but it would have been all bad if we had not arrived exactly when we did. I'm not sure if there is a correlation, but I noticed your name fits perfectly to the situation. When I was young, around 8 or 9 probably, I lived 3 blocks from a convenience store. It was the early 90s. My best friend and I convinced our parents to let us walk to the store alone to get some snacks. Important to add that the 2 blocks closest to the store are connected, but the 3rd block we lived on was its own unconnected neighborhood. So anyway, as we are walking back from the store, we are coming up to the first street and a truck drives by and stops on the side of the road in between the first and second block on our side of the road. I stopped and told my friend that we should go down the first street and go through the neighborhood, come back out the second street and then head to our 3rd street to avoid the truck. She thought I was being stupid, but I refused to keep walking on the main street, so she followed me down the first road. We are now in the first neighborhood and about halfway between the first and second street when we see the truck slowly driving down the second street into the neighborhood. The driver sees us and immediately slams on the gas and turns his truck towards us on the street. We ran and hid in some bushes further into the neighborhood for about 10 minutes. We heard the truck driving by back and forth for about the first 5 and then it was quiet, so we started making our way out of the neighborhood towards the second street again. Suddenly, here comes the truck again slowly, sees us and guns it towards us again. We jumped over a fence into a backyard and started pounding on the back door. By the way, this is a Tuesday. Middle of the day during summer vacation. Most people are at work. But miraculously, a man and woman opened the door and let us in. The woman had just had a baby like a week before, so they were home on leave. They called the cops and my mum and the man went outside. He said the truck drove by and the man saw him standing outside and sped out of the neighborhood. Cops and my mum showed up minutes later and we give a description and never heard anything about it again. Our parents just drove us to the convenience store from then on. My mom still talks about it to this day and how shocked she was that I had such a strong intuition at that age. I was driving and it started to snow. I noticed that I was going a bit fast and strongly sensed I should slow down. I did, and a couple seconds later I came up around a bend with the road suddenly being covered in ice. I started to fishtail while sliding directly towards two people standing outside their car. They had wrecked in the same manner that I was about to do and were standing outside their car, with me heading straight for them. I quickly thought of my options and ended up doing a hard right straight into the highway barrier. I slid nearly 100 plus feet, dragging the front of my car to slow it down. Because I had decided to slow down, I was able to give the two guys enough time to get out of the way before I slammed into their cars. Even though I totaled my car, which was sad, I did not end up killing two people that night. The police did not end up ticketing anyone, thankfully, and they finally sanded the road after we had all wrecked. Lol. Snow while driving still scares me to this day. I was an unpopular kid, and I always wanted to go on sleepovers, but it rarely happened. In 6th or 7th grade I get invited to this girl's house for a birthday party. I am friendly with her but not close. I go to her house and I feel weird right away. Her mum and stepdad were sitting in the living room smoking but being perfectly friendly. The whole night, I couldn't shake this feeling of oppressiveness, despair, and danger. I spent the evening keeping my guard up and keeping an eye out for the entire family, without any idea why. At night the girl begs me to spend the night. Even though it hurt to say no and I could tell she was desperate, I lied and told her my parents wouldn't let me, when they said over the phone they would. A couple of months later, a student told me she had left the school and moved because her stepfather would molest her at night in her bed. I think of her often, and hope she wasn't hurt that night, and hope she's doing better, but I'm glad I got out. My apostrophe key isn't working. Edited to add, no, I didn't understand what was going on. I would have told somebody. I was also being creeped out by her otherwise cute brother, which I just remembered. And there are multiple posts like this, not a repost. Which is very sad. That actually just broke my heart. So much evil in the world, shake my head. My dad had to go to court to settle a way overdue payment for the place he worked at. He was going to take me with him so I can be more exposed to the adult world, so to speak. However, that meant he would have to leave the office back door unlocked so the rest of the staff could clock in. He suddenly didn't feel right about it and decided to have me man the office instead. He got T-boned outside the courthouse on the passenger side of the car that day. The car was totaled and I would have gotten severely hurt if I was there. Edit 1. Wow, didn't expect people to love this story so much. To help clear some things up, we both first traveled together to his office to unlock the door. He got out of the car, unlocked the back door, and when he came back to the car, that's when he decided to tell me to stay at his office. It literally delayed him by only the few seconds it took for me to get out of said car. That's pretty similar to what happened with my mum and sister. The three of us were going to drive into the city to go to a show for my sister's birthday, but I, being a temperamental teenager at the time, had decided at the last minute that I did not want to go. Normally when in the car, I sit behind the driver's seat. As they were going down a multi-lane highway at 100 km per hour an hour, in lane 1, a car a few lanes, lane 3, overtook another car but clipped the car next to Mum's car in lane 2, so abruptly at 100 km per hour they were T-boned right in the rear driver's side door. Where I would have been. Mum's car spun several times but miraculously didn't hit anyone else and ended up on the side of the highway. Car was written off, but thankfully no one was injured beyond some minor superficial injuries. It didn't save me, but saved a friend. A big group of friends and I were walking home from an event in a town we weren't used to. It was night, and hardly anyone was around, empty streets and all that. We were walking down a sidewalk that had high fences next to it, so when you turned a corner, whatever was around it was out of sight. One of the girls fell behind, distracted by her phone, I think, and I noticed, so I started drifting behind as well to become a sort of midway point between her and the group. Soon, we were nearing where we were staying, and our group rounded a corner, then started making their way into the yard where our living quarters were. I saw a car drive past us, then turn the corner down the street the girl was still on. As soon as I saw it, I suddenly got this suspicious, awful feeling, so I stopped, and went back to the corner to keep an eye on the friend. The car drove past her, stopped, did a complete U-turn, and slowly started creeping up behind, alongside her. She was still on her phone, and wasn't noticing a thing. I stepped out from behind the corner, and started walking towards her. The car sped off quickly as soon as the driver saw me. It scares me that someone could have grabbed her, and none of us would have seen a thing. It would have just been one of those cliché movie moments where you turn around, and realize a member of the group is missing. To compound that potential tragedy, she'd just gotten engaged a few weeks prior. I think the fact that we had worked with some safe houses in the area that discussed human trafficking probably aided in me being on high alert, and the area we were in was known for that sort of thing. She's really lucky you were so aware of your surroundings and keeping an eye out for her as well. I had a gut feeling I should pull my wallet and phone out of my purse. Not even 20 seconds later, I get mugged. The man dragged me across the sidewalk and stole my purse, but all he ended up getting was a juice box and my birth control. What flavor was the juice box? And what flavor birth control? Thanks for binging with the Reddit Wolf. Don't forget to like and subscribe.